Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to Tech Tactics Live, episode 84. Tonight, we'll be talking about Porsche delivery programs, inside secrets to European delivery. Before we get started, I want to make sure we thank our sponsor, Pirelli. Without their support, none of this would happen. Of course, I want to remind you to please like, comment, and subscribe. We're really trying to get to that 100,000 number for subscribers. I believe we're currently around 86, 87,000. So any little bit helps. And of course, if you're watching live with us tonight, be sure to throw up questions that you might have in the live chat area. I will go through them and try to have our guests answer as many as possible. And speaking of guests, tonight we have someone that's not a stranger to PCA, certainly in the Chesapeake region and Potomac region here in our area. 16-year PCA member, a transaxle fan, former certified sales manager at Porsche of Silver Spring, and now owner of GroupCCreation.com. Casey Parkin. Casey, welcome.
Hey, thank you. Happy to be here.
Well, we spent a lot of time together in front of a camera, at events. We live and breathe this stuff. One of the things that we talk about often is European delivery programs and how awesome they are. So that's the topic for tonight. I want to ask Robert to throw up the agenda to let you know what we'll be covering. We're going to be talking about what dealers think of European delivery day, what to expect, traveling in Europe with your new Porsche, returning your car to the factory and how does it get to North America, picking up your car once it arrives in North America, and then what are some other options of deliveries in California as well as in Atlanta. So that's the general agenda. We may go back and forth a little bit depending on the questions. But, it goes back for me back in the 80s when my uncle, he bought a Volvo that took, delivery overseas. And I thought that was the coolest thing. And we talked to Europeans, and when they order cars, very often, even before the current sort of climate that we have with exclusivity and hard to get cars and you have to wait. But even back then, Europeans would, go into a dealership and pick exact combinations of what they want the car, get the right car for them, and they're willing to wait. But I think in the US, we've kind of conditioned ourselves to, let's go buy a car today, see a car on the lot, and then hopefully go home with that car. So European delivery doesn't really kind of come into play unless you're in the know. And I'm afraid a little bit about talking about this topic today is because it's such an amazing program. And I don't know, honestly, if they even have the capacity of, after a discussion like this, will they be able to handle all the people that are interested in it?
Right. So the European delivery program, I have been lucky enough to partake in it 3 times. My wife and I went in the summer of 2015. I had sent a couple of people before that point, and they all had a great time. And we had the opportunity to pick up a new Macan S. In the summer of 2015, Macan S sales were through the roof. We had an opportunity to go grab one. And doing that, a dealership, when you take European delivery of a car, you get an extra allocation. So dealerships are incentivized to do that. And thankfully, my employer was happy to send me on that trip. We had an amazing time. From that point, I have gone 2 subsequent times, once this past summer and once a week ago. So it was, I've got it pretty fresh in my mind, so I'm looking forward to speaking with you about those things tonight.
So let's maybe some possibly myths because of the way the buying habits of the US and Canadian market of liking the car and going home with it. Do dealers prefer that transaction versus you coming in and saying, "Oh, I want to order my car and take European delivery"? Like, is there a difference? Do they treat it differently? Do they prefer?
So you have certain people that come into the office and say things like, "I want to do European delivery of a Porsche." During COVID times, that escalated dramatically. I listened to a podcast where someone was quoted saying, like, if you go to your dealership and say, "Oh, I can take European delivery of a car," and you just end up with an extra allocation to get that car, it's not necessarily the way that it works. But dealerships are incentivized to send clients on European delivery because, let's say you wanted to go pick up a 911 C4S. If you have to have an allocation, then you would order that vehicle, and once the vehicle is dropped off back at the delivery center in Germany or returned back to Porsche, the dealership in the United States would get an extra allocation for a similar car or less. So let's say it's a GT3 RS, a dealership wouldn't get an extra GT3 RS allocation, but they would get an extra 911 allocation. And in getting an extra 911 allocation, being is that they build those cars every year, in perpetuity you would continue to get that car. So it's highly incentivized for dealerships to utilize the program.
Really? Okay, I never really heard that before. So
it's a little bit inside baseball, but it's a huge deal. Gaining share of nation for a Porsche dealership is remarkably important because the dealership that I was at, a lot of the programs that we participated in, one was European delivery, another one was the Porsche Restoration Challenge, as we've spoken about before, but that got the dealership that I worked with before a tremendous amount of 911 allocations, and possibly even the most in this region, even though we weren't the biggest dealership.
Now, I think you know me well enough that I always love a good deal.
Sure.
So when I'm going to a dealership and I'm negotiating the price of a car that's on the lot, is that different from negotiating a price on a car that I'm ordering?
You know, it's been a little bit since I've been in the seat making those decisions. Traditionally, if there is a car on the lot, unless it was during COVID times where maybe a 911 or something slipped through and it was there, a dealership, like I said, is incentivized to do European delivery, not necessarily in the regard that where they get money from the manufacturer. The dealership actually has to pay to send somebody on European delivery. They effectively, it was I think over last summer, it was a few $1,000s if I'm not mistaken, but that money went to registration and either 9 or 16 days worth of insurance while that car was being driven through Europe.
So that's from the dealer's perspective. How about from the salesperson's perspective?
That's an interesting question. I mean, of course, depends on the dealership that you're working with, but when it came to European delivery, there is money taken off the top end of the deal, and traditionally a salesperson is paid upon the gross profit of a car. So of course that would lessen that. But the other thing to think about is if a salesperson is sending a person to do European delivery, you're going to end up with a customer who is going to see the Porsche ownership and construction process in a completely different light. And for me, and I work mostly on referral basis with my customers after such a long time, but the way that I looked at it is if I sent somebody on a very interesting trip, they would tell their friends about that trip. It gives them more appreciation for Porsche as a brand, and they also see me as the kind of person that would have, being that I'd offered them that opportunity, it got me more referral business. So for me, European delivery was always a must-do.
So for me, it's a bucket list item to hopefully, put in order for a new Porsche. And when I talk to members, and I know when Manny gets the calls and such, when people are planning to do something like that for themselves, we know how incredibly special Porsche takes care of its customers during the European delivery program. And again, my worries is that we're sharing this with so many viewers and such that they might not be able to handle the demand of people wanting to do this. But it is probably the most as you said, if you're sending a customer there, like if they aren't already a lifelong fan of Porsche, when they do a delivery such as that, I mean, it's like it seals the deal. Like you will not be able to walk away from the mark because you go to the homeland, you get the factory tours, and just I won't give it all away because you're going to share what it's like to do a European delivery. But man, there's nothing better to build a brand ambassador than to take a European delivery.
It's a tremendous experience. Both for my clients that I sent and for myself personally. I will be honest with you and let you know that I have done 3 Stuttgart deliveries, even though I did take delivery of a Macan the first time that we went. I did choose to do it in Stuttgart because for me, seeing the history of where Porsche came from, and being that it takes place in the exact same place that other than when they were in Austria, the majority of Porsches were built. At least 2-door cars. That's something for me that was very important, and also getting an opportunity to see the museum and get a tour of the factory where Taycans, at least the last 2 trips I went, and 911s, it's very special.
So let's say you've gotten to the dealer, you've decided that you're going to do European delivery, you've negotiated the price that you want to pay on the car. How is the transaction the same or different from that point?
So I will be upfront and honest with you that due to the amount of demand that there is for European delivery, it's very difficult. It's way more difficult to get European delivery than it is to get something like let's say, paint to sample. If I'm not mistaken, there are something like 350, 380 slots for the entire United States for 1 year of European delivery.
Say that again, 300 and some slots for the entire
country. Now, keep in mind that might be only in Stuttgart. It might double when you go to Leipzig. I was trying to get some extra numbers today, which I was unable to. But it's a very finite amount of spots. So it's much easier to get a paint to sample Porsche than it is to get European
So how do
delivery.
they distribute those quote-unquote allocations of factory deliveries?
So this is a funny story. So my wife and I traveled to Germany the end of last June. We took a big trip. It was awesome. But part of it was I was going to sign for a client their GT3 RS in Germany. I did not get to drive the car, but we did rent a car through Porsche Drive, a C4S. Bucket list thing for me has always been to drive a 911 in Germany, which we were able to. We went through the Swabian Alps.
Nice.
And had a tremendous time. I'm sure some pictures will pop up there later, but had a great time. But I was told by European Delivery that I needed to get the requirements for the next batch of cars. There's the C4S there. That was a great winery that we were at. That was the view, which was incredible. But I had to get the list of people that needed European delivery with all of their paperwork filled out on July 1st. So I was in Germany taking European delivery of a car, and I had on my laptop queued up 6 clients that needed European delivery starting in October and going through March.
Oh, wow.
So literally the European delivery that I did last week through circumstances to basically some scheduling conflicts for another client of mine, I submitted that paperwork the last time I was in Germany because it was that important to me that my clients were able to go on that trip.
So they reached out to the dealership and said, you will have 6 slots and I need those names by a certain date.
It didn't work like that at all. Basically, I knew that they opened up at a certain point, and I knew that I needed to get those documents to them at that moment to put those people in queue. There was no guarantee, that they were going to get.
So maybe that's a very good disclaimer for this particular episode of Tech Tactics Live, is we're telling you about something that's amazingly cool, and if you have the opportunity to do it, do so. But be warned that it is incredibly difficult.
It's difficult, and it's during COVID times, people pulled back, right? So as they reopened European delivery and the world opened back up, the people that wanted sports cars during that time made that big push to do European delivery, and I applaud them. but unfortunately, there's only so much capacity
Sure.
that they have for this. Because remember, it's for the entire world where there are people coming in
Yeah.
to drive these cars around Europe. And Germany's in a great spot. They're literally 6 hours from anywhere in,
All right.
in
So,
Europe.
so let's say you have an allocation for this customer, such as myself, that came through, and then how does the paperwork progress? Like, are you paying for the car?
So traditionally, the way that it works is the dealership is given the opportunity to collect value-added tax from you or not, depending upon the relationship that they have with the customer. But when you see an invoice for a European delivery car, there will always be VAT added to the bottom of it. That's something that is a discussion for these folks to have with their delivery center.
Okay.
But effectively, the car is paid for 1 month in advance. You can either pay cash for the car, or you can pay for the car utilizing Porsche Financial Services. You traditionally cannot use another bank because if you are financing a car, there is no collateral for a bank to collect on.
Right.
Because the car is still in Europe. It's not in the United States. So you would either...
Can I pause you right there?
Of course.
Because this is a good time to ask you. Lee H. wrote on the live chat, is this, let's say you did have the allocation, would this be available to them if they were leasing the car?
Of course. Yes.
It is available.
It
Okay,
is.
as long as it's leased through
It has to be
Porsche
leased through
Financial.
Porsche Financial
Okay, so
Services.
there you
Now,
go.
the one
Lee.
thing to keep in mind is that you're going to be paying on your lease while the car is still in transport from Germany to the United States.
Because effectively you're taking delivery
That's
when you
correct.
land, right?
So yes, you absolutely can lease the vehicle, but remember that you're not going to have the car for a period of time where you will be effectively paying your lease payments.
Okay. So now you've got payments ready. You've signed documents that you're going to do it. You know when you land in Germany that and go to the car, that's pretty much taking delivery and your ownership there. What is included in terms of like airfare and hotel and how's all that?
So that's an interesting thing. Getting to Stuttgart recently has proved to be a little bit difficult, at least from the DC area. The first time I went, flew through Munich, connected into Stuttgart. Pretty simple.
Or here you can do BWI Atlanta directly into Stuttgart.
Correct.
Yeah.
So what we did over the summer was flew a United flight out of Dulles, which is close to where my wife and I live. Flew. It was delayed slightly. We missed our connection. We flew into Frankfurt.
Ah, okay.
It actually worked out great. We didn't get on our flight, but there's a train station at Frankfurt that literally takes you to within 200 yards in Stuttgart of the hotel, the Steigenberger Graf Zeppelin. It's very convenient. So that is what we did over the summer. When I went last week, the trains were on strike.
Oh,
so I took my best friend from college. He'd never been to Europe before. And he and I did a bunch of back and forth regarding what we were planning on doing. But this trip, what we did was we flew into Frankfurt. We rented an Audi, drove the Audi, parked it at the hotel, and that was our means of transport for the trip. Super simple. I did learn after the fact that Porsche does have agreements with Avis in Germany to get you some better rates. We used a company called Sixt. But there are also some incentives to utilize Delta. That would be something for. It's changed slightly since I was effectively part of the program, but it's the kind of thing that you would want to speak to get the most up-to-date offers from Porsche European Delivery Program and from Porsche Cars North America.
So I've been fortunate enough to ride the coattails of some other people during European Delivery, and I did an early one where European Delivery used to be in Works 1, actually, where the Taycan manufacturing facility is now, is the building where it used to be, and doing the delivery there. Where's the delivery now? Obviously,
so they've got a new facility that I'm not exactly sure of the date that it opened, but it's attached to a couple of German words and then Zuffenhausen at the end of it, but it's effectively where Porsche resells used vehicles. So you walk into this beautiful facility. When we were in there, they had a 000
Edition.
Well, sorry, no, a prototype ST,
Oh, okay.
so 000 number.
Oh,
and then
okay.
they had a number of GT4 RSs, a Spider RS, which I guess I saw at Rennsport, but I hadn't seen one otherwise. A number of other 911s. And you waited there. The people were extremely nice. They had a nice fitting lounge upstairs that was fully exclusive. Served us not big enough cups of coffee because we got there. We were supposed to be there at 7:45 in the morning, but we relaxed a little bit, and it was pretty interesting. The gentleman that delivered the GT3 RS to my buddy and I, Dan, was the same person that delivered the Macan to my wife and I in 2015, and I recognized him. Another good friend of mine had them to deliver his Dakar the other day as well, which was cool. So. It was a great experience that day, but you effectively get there. There's 2 slots. There's morning and afternoon. Mine have always been morning, and so that's what we did this past time.
Yeah, I think I'm very familiar with that building. You kind of go around the back of the museum and you cross over the train tracks, and it's a very nice facility. And you kind of go through there's these gates, guarded gates, where
That is, yep,
you're guarded gates, and you have, all of the used cars that they've kind of redone to be prepared
It might
for
be
sale.
from Porsche Drive or
But
something
what
like
I
that.
saw inside that garage was really cool. It almost looked like a vending machine. And it was a vending machine for the keys of the hundreds of cars there. And you obviously you have to have the special code to get in it and all. So, so you get there, and I'm assuming a team will meet you. I'm assuming the expectation, not only do you get to see everything that has to do with a car in the facilities at Stuttgart, but at some point you're going to drive your car out on the public roads.
That's correct. So this particular trip, I opted not to drive this particular car. It was a paint to sample Gulf Blue GT3 RS, and it wasn't my car. And in the wintertime in Germany,
Sure.
It's not necessarily something you want to do. One thing I will tell you is that in the wintertime, Germany requires either all-season or winter tires to be fitted to a vehicle. So when you do fill out your paperwork, if it is around winter months, you have to sign a little piece of the paper that says, please put winter tires on my car. So when you do that, you do have to return the car back to Zuffenhausen or Sindelfingen, which is right down the road, or to Leipzig, so that they are able to pull the winter wheels off of the car and put your wheels back on. Being that I was taking delivery of such a remarkable vehicle, that was really a crowning achievement of my client that was I was helping out that time. I wasn't going to.
But you're not going to drive the car.
Not that car.
So speaking of checking off the boxes, in this case you were talking about tires, but so many of us that take delivery of, say, newer cars, probably the first thing that we want to do is to protect the car.
For sure.
And so if you're taking delivery and you're going out on the autobahn and public roads, what are people's options in terms of like PPF and such?
So the Porsche, to my knowledge, at least when I was part of the brand, didn't have that. I do have clients that have taken European delivery of GT3s, GT3 RSs, and they order something off of Amazon. I think it's called track wrap or something like that.
Yeah.
And they just put it in their suitcase, and before they pull out, they just stick it on the front of their car. I had a client literally drive his car from the European Delivery Center due north to Spa, and did a track day at Spa, and that's what he did with that car. And then the next GT3 he had, he did the exact same thing, and he's taking a European delivery GT3 RS this summer. I'm sure he'll do the same thing again. So I think it's called track wrap. Don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure he got it on
track
Amazon.
wrap, I think, is an Expel product.
Yep.
So I've always wondered about this, and I don't know how to answer it. So when you get delivery of your new car, there's typically a break-in time, mileage, procedure, this, that, and the other. So now you're taking delivery of the car in Germany, but you want to take it out on the road, take it to, maybe you want to take it to Nürburgring, I don't know. But how do you factor in that break-in point?
So I am not an engineer, nor am I a technician or a Porsche, somebody that built the car. But I will tell you that a lot of the break-in process, in my experience with being with the brand, is not lugging the car. So more so than engine exercise, the last thing you'd want to do is take a 911 or something like that,
And sit
go
at-
out on the autobahn and sit at 1700 RPMs while the car
I
is
see, I
doing
see.
140 kilometers or whatever. That's not what you want to do. To my knowledge, and not that this is I've ever really experienced this because I've not broken in a car in Germany, but exercising engine speed up to, let's say, I think Porsche says, depending on the car, 42, 45, 5,000 RPM, something like that. But it's not necessarily top vehicle speed. It's really the engine speed of the car.
Okay.
So making sure that you adhere to that, especially if you're going to own the car for a long time and want to be a good steward of it, to do things like seat the rings and make sure that all of the parts are blending correctly.
Yeah.
You want to make sure that you keep track of that. But I would also ask that when you're taking delivery of the car, Tillman was the gentleman that took care of my buddy and I this past week when we were there. I'm sure that he knew the exact answer to that question. I just didn't ask it because I wasn't going to drive the car.
Right. So, you're taking delivery of a U.S. car in Germany, so there are things that are different on U.S. cars than European cars. But one of the biggest things is, how do you tag it and insurance and all that kind of stuff work when you're driving your U.S. car in Germany?
So when you sign up for European delivery, on the European delivery form, there's a box that you can say, I want 9 days of registration or 16 days of registration. Those are accommodated for within Porsche. You can choose longer. I think it's 30 or 60 days, but of course there are fees associated with that. The car does come with a small tag that says S and then has a date on the back of it, which goes on the back of the car. It is German law that there is a tag that goes on the front. Most 911s that I see, they basically have some super heavy-duty Velcro. Well, there's a portion of the European delivery form that says, no, I do not want a front license plate affixed to my vehicle.
Oh.
And so they don't drill holes at that point, but they use Velcro to fashion it to the front. There was a gentleman there from Colorado, if I believe, taking delivery of a Macan GTS, and they had his fixed to the front grille of his Macan. It was not Velcroed like as it was on a 911.
And do you know how insurance works? Like,
It's part of the program. So that, like when I explained earlier that the dealership pays for a portion of it, that portion that the dealership pays for goes towards registration and insurance, to the best of my knowledge.
So when you're over there, your Geico or State Farm insurance
It's
here,
not
it's not
applicable.
applicable
No.
because you're in a different country.
That's
So
correct.
they have something that covers you.
Correct.
Which is smart. Here's a question. During this process, does it delay sort of the delivery of your car? Let's say if I came in and spec'd a car with you, you say, okay, it's going to be delivered in May. But if I say I'm going to do European delivery, does it push it out and say, oh no, your car is going to possibly be made later or made earlier? Or?
So I've got a, yeah, it's definitely adds time. You're basically
It adds time.
You're basically working on a couple of different functions. If you do get accepted, there is the possibility that they could move the allocation forward or backward to accommodate that specific time of the European delivery. And then not to mention that when you drop the car off, from that point, the car is treated a little bit differently because it's technically owned by someone. It's not owned by Porsche AG and then transferred to Porsche Cars North America. So that does delay the amount of time getting the car through customs. But like over the summer, like when I was talking about on July 1st, not all of those cars that I submitted that day have even taken delivery yet.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I've got my good friend Mike. Happy birthday, Mike. He turned 60 years old today. But he's taking delivery of a Turbo GT with his wife Jen here in a little bit. And when they do that, it's going to add time to it, but I don't think he's going for another month.
Oh.
So that was something that I put together last July, and now it's, I don't even know what it's, February something.
Yeah. Oh. So do you, when you're there taking delivery of your car, is there a mileage limit or a time limit of how long you can be over there and how long you can spend with the car?
So like I mentioned earlier, you do have the opportunity to do either 9 or 16 days with the car. There's 2 boxes. I don't know how they came to those numbers, but then you can choose to do longer. It's just a separate charge.
So you can keep driving your car.
30 or 60 days, I think, is 60 days. I think is the max, but don't quote me on that.
Okay. Now, asking for a friend, Manny, what happens when you get caught speeding?
I have no idea. I would not.
I'm sure they can
when,
track the tags back.
When I'm sure that, well, I'm sure if it's a speed camera ticket, they will mail you something. The speed limits over there, I would recommend sticking to them. There is a number of places with unrestricted autobahn if you really wanted to squeeze it a bit. But honestly, the speed limits there, especially the ones outside of towns in certain areas that are kind of what I would say rural with really interesting twisties, like when we were in the Swabian Alps, it was pretty amazing because the speed limits that were posted were way higher than I wanted to drive even in a 911.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So speaking of going through towns and such, obviously going through a European town, even a 911 is a fairly large vehicle. So do you have any, I guess, tips or suggestions for people that are going to take their car through these little towns?
Just be super aware and make sure that you are completely awake while you're doing it. Because you're going to be jet lagged. So sometimes you, like I would have a funny story that I won't get into, but it's make sure that you drink lots of coffee and that you're very awake and alert while driving.
And they have very good coffee.
I don't know. I like American coffee, but we'll go
the
from
weak
there.
stuff.
Yeah.
I will share just some of my experience overseas and in Germany when driving. They do have speed cameras, much like they do here in the United States. However, they are calibrated to, like, even if you're 2 kilometers over the speed limit, like, it'll flash and you'll get that ticket in the mail. It is.
Yeah.
There's no joke about that, especially during or driving through like construction zones. So
Yeah, I definitely
watch your speed.
Definitely recommend going the speed limit for sure.
How about so coming into Stuttgart and getting your car? That's pretty straightforward. But let's say you have your 9 or 16-day adventure. Does Porsche help you plan that, or are you kind of on your own?
You're on your own.
You're on your own when you're doing that.
I'm sure that with the help of people in the Porsche European Delivery Program, they can certainly make recommendations. I have a very good friend. We both have friends there, Aaron and Minta. They gave us a whole bunch of great spots to go. Through my experience of sending people on these trips, I get all kinds of recommendations. So there are tremendous roads right around Stuttgart, all in every direction from there. The first trip that we took, my wife and I, we did basically a 4-day blitz. We went from Stuttgart, we went to a town called Rothenburg, which is a medieval village, and then we went down to Munich for a couple of days. Came down further to Neuschwanstein, which is the castle that they based Cinderella's castle on, which was amazing. Went over to Lindau, which is Lake Constance, which is across the border from Switzerland, which was beautiful. And then back up to Stuttgart. So it depends on how much time you have, but it's pretty easy to plan trips. There's so much more data out there now than pre-internet times. You can find I'm sure an Anthony Bourdain something or other to figure out time to places to go in Munich or something like that for great experiences.
So there's lots of amazing destinations, but what I love most about being in Germany, especially if you're in a Porsche, is the time in between the destinations. Because it's not perfect. The roadways aren't perfect, but there is sort of a dance or understanding that all drivers have. Like, once in a while you get an outlier that doesn't understand and they hang out in the left lane. But in Germany, when you're in the left lane, that is for passing.
Yeah.
And when people see you coming up on them, they gracefully move. It's a dance, and everybody knows the dance. And they move out of the way.
It's a zipper.
Yeah, and they zipper when you kind of come together. There's no passing on the right, so it's really cool how well people drive out there. Again, there are outliers, but for the most part, driving a car like that, and when you get to that special gray circle with the slash, and that means there's really no speed limit, and you feel much more confident going at a good clip in the left lane, knowing that the other people on the roads share this common knowledge of what the dance is on the road.
But realize that you'll be in a Porsche going, let's say, 150, 170 kilometers an hour. And there'll be a guy in a Passat wagon.
Oh yeah,
a diesel Passat
totally.
Wagon doing 220 kilometers an hour. It goes by you as fast as possible. You're never the fastest guy on the road.
But it's such a cool experience because once you ship that car back here,
you can do
there
that
are very few places here. Yeah, there's very few places that you can do that. So, okay, cool. Let's see. We've talked about touring in your new Porsche. So now that it's come to where you're driving, back to where you got the car from, you need to turn it back in.
Sure.
So what happens then?
So there are two no-cost places where you can drop off, as I mentioned earlier, the same places that you would drop off if you had winter wheels. That's in a town called Sindelfingen. Might be pronouncing that incorrectly, but it's near Stuttgart. That is their drop-off location. And then, of course, Leipzig. So whether you're in a Macan or a Cayenne or a Panamera or anything, you can drop off at either location. There's no issues there. Porsche does have a list of other drop-off locations across Europe. I had a friend that was considering dropping his car off in Paris. You basically have to make sure that you make the call a couple of weeks in advance to let them know that you're coming. He didn't end up doing it, but I did have a colleague once drop his car off in Zurich. And that, of course, does take a little bit more time because the car gets dropped off in Zurich and then it needs to be shipped back to Porsche and then it leaves from Porsche. So there are a number of different places, but of course with those places that are not Porsche themselves, there are costs associated with dropping them there.
Speaking of costs, and I can't believe I skipped this question, but one of our viewers, Robert here, how much does this experience cost and what's included in the price?
So I have no idea what they're currently charging for European delivery. I know that they charge the dealerships. I think it's a nominal fee, maybe $1,500, $2,000. Don't quote me. I've not looked at the 2025 or 2024 configurator very much since I left, but I'm sure it's listed there as a delivery option, just as Atlanta and Los Angeles are. But basically what is included is a one-night stay at the hotel that's by Leipzig, or the hotel that I mentioned earlier, the Steigenberger Graf Zeppelin, which is in downtown Stuttgart.
And that's where, ladies and gentlemen, I feel this program is an absolute bargain for really a Porsche enthusiast's dream to how to take delivery of your car. That's crazy.
As a guy that really literally bled Porsche since I was a little kid and was affiliated with the brand for so long, I can tell you that there is no better experience in owning a Porsche than seeing it at the factory being produced and hopefully taking delivery of your car there. There is nothing that will give you more appreciation.
So I think Manny just checked on the configurator and it lists $1,500 for 2024. That is ladies and gentlemen, that is a bargain. If you can get that.
Well, and it used to be about a decade ago was $10,000, or sorry, it was $4,000 if I'm not mistaken. And then they ended up charging the dealership, and now they kind of do a split of the two.
That. If you have the opportunity, man, I can't believe that's crazy.
I'd recommend it to anyone, especially people that would be watching this.
So speaking of Leipzig, I don't know if you've been there. I've been there. You've not. And if you, let's say, can't get a allocation, so to speak, to do a delivery in Stuttgart, by all means, take the delivery in Leipzig, because that place is also very special, especially if you're going to be taking delivery of a four-door Porsche. It makes sense to take it at Leipzig. And Leipzig, it's not Stuttgart, but they have a lot of special things there as well.
And the other part about Leipzig delivery is they do have a track it has a number of corners that are replicated from
like 7 different tracks.
Yeah, from 7 like the Nürburgring Carousel and those sorts of things. But they do give you an opportunity to not take your car, but a car similar to the type of your vehicle out on that track for vehicle instruction, which is similar to what they do at the Porsche Experience Center in both Atlanta and Los Angeles.
We probably should touch upon, so let's say you are taking European delivery of a car that is so, let's say, amazing and rare and this, that, and the other, and you don't want to take that car on your 9 or 16-day trip. You mentioned you did the Porsche program. I believe it's called the Drive program that's available at the museum. What did it, how did you do that, and what did it cost?
So I booked it in advance. It was kind of expensive, but like I said, a bucket list item for me was to drive a 911 in Germany. Unfortunately, the day that we picked it up, it was pouring down rain, but it was in a C4S, so it was great. But basically, you schedule it in advance. They have a whole bunch of different cars that you can take, anywhere from a Macan to GT3s. It's Porsche Drive. You do it through your My Porsche app. And basically, there'll be a queue of cars sitting underneath the reflective ceiling of the Porsche Museum in Stuttgart. The car's sitting there. You go sign in at the desk, and they'll walk you out to your car, and then make sure that you're aware. But basically, I think it was 500 euros for the day, and that was over the summer, so the euro was pretty expensive. It was almost 1-to-1 at that point. And I think it was 250 kilometers. I wanted to drive to a couple of different areas, but I kind of did the math and didn't want to get myself too close to that buffer. So that's why I mentioned that we went down through the Alps and went to that great winery that the photo came up earlier. It was awesome.
So driving a Porsche in Germany, Stuttgart, wherever, I mean, I think you would want to pick spring or summer, but do you have a choice?
It's difficult because you're kind of working with, especially when it comes to more difficult cars to buy. You can only get allocations at certain times of the year, and then so the car that I took delivery of last week was one, it was a GT3 RS, which is hard to get. Two, it was paint to sample, and then of course it was European delivery. So all three of those things put me there on January 29th. And that is definitely not the nicest time to be in Europe, but at the same time, it was 50 degrees outside. My buddy Dan and I were going to beer gardens, sitting outside with Aaron and Minta, and it was an awesome time. If they would have put the appropriate tires on the car, I would have had no issue going for a drive that day. Not a problem at all.
So when you drop the car off, do you have to drop it off empty, or let's say you bought things along your trip?
You want to take your things out of the car.
Okay.
They recommend, if I'm not mistaken, you take your books with you. You take your key. One of the two keys, and then in Europe they also require you to have things like med packs and triangles and such. You can probably take those with you as well. I left those in the car. I kind of stuffed them underneath the back seat of the GT3 RS because I really wanted them to come back with the car. But yeah, you don't leave anything in the car.
So when the cars get back there, you hand over the keys, you grabbed all your stuff out of it. Most of the cars that you see kind of come into our ports here are covered in the white, especially like a GT3, they're kind of almost like saran wrapped with white saran wrap. Do they do that to the car now, or do they don't?
The cars do not get rewrapped. They might do
travel across the sea without
the wrapping. Yeah, so there might be some more sensitive areas that they might cover, but the majority of the spots are left uncovered. It's not like a traditional GT3 where you have to unzip the car from the bag. But it's very rare to see cars damaged in that.
I was about to say, does it make you nervous that it's coming back without all that?
I wouldn't bother me.
You wouldn't worry about it.
Honestly, if the car ended up with a small scratch on it, as long as it wasn't there when you drop the car off, it would be taken care of by Porsche. And to me, the experience itself far trumps a small scratch on a car.
So let's say along your drives, and there are tight roads over there, and these cars are wide, and you have tires with no sidewall and big rims. Let's say you curb a wheel, and when you bring it back, what are your options there?
I'm sure it would be notated, and then they just make sure that you're aware of it, and then when you get it back to the States, hopefully you bought your wheel and tire insurance so the dealership can take care of it for you.
Okay, so they're not going to do it there. They're going to until it...
I had one client get an fender bender when it was there, and the car... they got the car basically to the point where it was drivable, and then returned the car to the United States.
And then the rest of the fix happened in the States.
Yeah, wasn't very significant.
Okay.
That might have been a one-off case. It was a very long time ago.
Okay, and so now that it's getting ready to be shipped to the U.S., what ports do they come into?
Wherever the one that's assigned to the dealership that you procured the car from.
And how many ports are there in the U.S.?
5 or 4 or 5.
4 or 5.
I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then
it probably might be 6.
Okay.
Or 5.
So it comes into the port, and then from that point on, it's just like
shipped to the dealership, just like any other car.
And then you get it's kind of the presentation again. Here's your car again. Surprise.
Absolutely.
Oh, okay.
So you get the delivery twice.
All right. Now we talked about European delivery. Now look at some questions here, but there are also some options in Atlanta and in Los Angeles as well.
Absolutely. So there are experience centers, just like as we were mentioning earlier about Leipzig, but there's experience centers in both Atlanta and Los Angeles. So you can choose to check a box, just like you would check a box for European delivery. Then the car would get sent to the associated ports. You would get a scheduled call effectively, I think about 45 days out from the projected delivery time to set the time with either Los Angeles or Atlanta. And when that would occur, you go down there, and it's a very similar situation to what I experienced in Germany, where they go over the car with you. They have specialists there, and then you would have the opportunity to take a similar car to the one that you have out onto the racetrack with instruction, which is pretty awesome.
And how are those numbers of availability to take delivery at those centers?
It's far easier, but it is still limited because a lot of people are checking those boxes, and they only can do so many of those deliveries per day.
And maybe we can ask Manny. Manny, does the configurator show the cost of a delivery to
I think
Atlanta
it's probably
and Los
$600 or
Angeles?
$700 if I had to bet.
$600 or $700? Again, I think that's pretty cool.
It's a great value. The other thing, you also get a lunch at the associated restaurants at either the experience. I think it's called. One of them is 917 and one of them is 356.
Right.
In Germany, you also, I didn't mention this, but after you take delivery, you do get a tour of the factory, and then you get a really great meal at the casino, which is basically this. It's on the top of one of the original Porsche buildings.
On top of Works One.
Yes, it is on top of Works One. It's an exceptional lunch. It's great.
Very cool. I did have a question about, so does the timing and such affect the delivery as much if you're choosing California or Los Angeles and Atlanta as it does with a European, or it's less of a factor?
It's less of a factor, but it still adds time.
It still adds time.
It does.
Okay. Now I know I've seen in Atlanta, when you take delivery in their special garage, there's a couple of different whiteboards, and everybody that takes delivery, you get to sign them. Do they have that in
Not that I saw,
Germany? No. Okay, so that's kind of cool to be able to do that for Atlanta and,
Absolutely.
and LA.
No, I've had I have one client in mind that you and I were speaking about earlier that did a European delivery of a Macan. It was great because when they traded the car back into us, it had a Nürburgring sticker on it. Because they lapped the Nürburgring in the car, which I thought was super cool. But they did that trip, and then the second delivery that they took from me in another Macan GTS was at Los Angeles, and they did that specifically, and we lined it up so that they took delivery in, I think it was June of last year, and then took the car straight from there, and then went to the PCA parade at Palm Springs.
I think if it were my bucket list and I was able to get the allocations, order a new car, take delivery in Stuttgart, do the 9 or 16 days, and then when the car gets shipped back, is it an option to have it shipped back to Atlanta?
That'd be great, but the answer is no.
Oh, darn it.
Can't
right,
do
because
that.
you imagine like you
can't
get
double dip.
and get it
can't
delivered at
double dip.
Atlanta,
Yeah.
and then fly down to Atlanta and then drive the car, 10 hours or so back to Baltimore. Like that would be the ultimate delivery.
That'd be really cool. But yeah, I do not think
can't
that is
double dip.
possible. Yeah.
Okay, well, I had to ask.
Yeah.
Let's see. So, any other questions here? Someone here, Brad Dennis, he just wanted to chime in and say the Porsche Drive program in Europe, he did it, and at the museum, he said the people were amazing.
Yeah, it's great. No, they're super kind, very, very nice folks.
And let's see, we have Ron Dempsey. You probably can't confirm this because you're not really in that seat anymore, but Ron Dempsey mentions that his dealer said that the fees may be substantially going up after May.
No idea.
No idea, right? But
Sure, I mean, they probably wouldn't change it in the middle of a model year. May was traditionally the time where they lift embargo for certain vehicles for the 2025 model year, and I would assume that being that Porsche is rolling out all of these different models now, like the Panamera and
Macan
Taycan and Macan EV, once those hit the configurator, which I'm sure some of them have, I just haven't checked. It's funny how far out of the loop I am anymore, but I'm assuming that, who knows, that those fees might go up.
So with European delivery or delivery at Los Angeles or Atlanta, is it truly luck of the draw, or would you say cars that are like a GT3 RS or GT2 RS or an ST, like do those cars get priority of European delivery?
Nope.
No?
I do not believe so.
I hope it isn't, because I
No,
hope it would be fair for
No,
everybody.
a lot of it comes down to the persistence of the sales team that you're working with.
Mm-hmm.
Bring them lots of donuts. Be nice to them. Be
Yeah.
patient, and just explain to them that this is a dream of yours. Make sure that they're aware of that, and then the onus is on them to do all that they can. I will tell you that there are going to be a number of occasions where it's not possible,
Yeah.
and I have told people that in the past. But if they really are waiting for European delivery, if you have patience, I believe that if you're working with the right team, they can figure it out for you.
So I'm going to throw this one at you. You probably haven't thought about it. So let's say someone asked and you're kind of guiding them through European delivery. You've been on a couple. Is there anything that you weren't happy with, or you would change in the process that you think would make it even better for the customer?
I'm really OCD.
Yeah.
So I do a whole lot of planning in advance.
Mm-hmm.
I would work on contingencies, things like travel. Getting to Europe is sometimes difficult, as I was explaining earlier about train strikes and those sorts of things. If I had a plan to only take a train from Frankfurt to Stuttgart, but thankfully my buddy went like 2 weeks earlier and said the trains were shut down, figure something else out. So we got on German news and just followed the Deutsche Bahn train strikes.
Okay.
And we figured out like 2 days before that they weren't going to hit, that it wasn't going to work. It worked on Monday, but on Sunday when we got there, it wasn't happening. So we just made sure that we had planned excessively in advance. The other thing is, make sure that you map out places that you would like to go. I'm sure there's all kinds of Facebook groups for German tourism, those sorts of things. And the other thing to know is that the car is pretty much legal to go anywhere. You just need to make sure that if you travel into other countries, such as, let's say, Austria, you need to make sure you get an Austrian autobahn pass.
Oh, the passes, yeah. The stickers for
so
the
when you
windshield.
go into different countries, you need to make sure that you do your diligence to make sure that you are legal to be in that country, because the last thing that you would want to do is to not have the right accreditation and to get pulled over in a situation like that, and that just, it wouldn't be a good move.
So does Porsche ask you what are you doing on your 9 or 16-day
No.
trip and give you tips for that?
Nope.
They don't. That's
But
not. That's,
I'm sure that if you,
maybe if you went to Porsche Travel.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. But the other thing to think of is if you asked, I never did the diligence because I had some familiarity. I'm assuming that if you worked hard to reach out to the people at Porsche to gain some insight in that, I'm sure that they would work with you to make sure your trip was awesome.
Okay. Here's a question from Lee Lawrence. How many weeks notice do you get for the European delivery pickup date? Is it usually months out, weeks out?
So that's a great question. So they give you a range of dates and they kind of hone in on a date. But Porsche will not formally confirm that the date is a go until your car is completed production. Let's say that, so you can certainly, I would tell everybody that if you have a European delivery date, to make sure that you have refundable airfare if you are going to book your airfare in advance. Because the last thing that you would ever want to happen is to go there and your car wasn't available. These things didn't really happen before COVID, but when things like that occurred with chip shortages and those sorts of things, or there'd be a stop order in a certain part of your car, there would be times where dates would get pushed. I mean, anybody that has ordered a Porsche recently knows that it's not going to show up early, that's for sure. But you only formally lock it in and book it when the people from Porsche European Delivery say, it's a go, car's locked, the car's produced, you've got a VIN number, go ahead and book your airfare. And that is kind of closer. For some people, that will be too close for comfort.
Right.
To making sure that that's going to be possible.
Yeah, no, totally understand. Just got a quick email. I've got to read this. Joseph, who I was riding his coattails when he took delivery of his car. One of the things that was really cool in our experience there was we had some people sign the cars. Like if you run into someone that might be notable in the Porsche world, or maybe was it Tillman?
Yep.
You like him so much. Like are people asking folks to sign the car?
I had a client, I think with the GT4 or GT4S, had Andy Preuninger sign part of the car. But that's the only experience like that I've heard of.
Very cool. Any other tips or insider secrets with European delivery and or Los Angeles and Atlanta?
No, I mean, the only thing that I will always remind people is that just make sure that you're nice and kind and patient to the people that work for Porsche dealerships across the United States, because you have no idea how far that will get you with getting these extremely awesome opportunities.
Yeah, and a lot of times you may be looking for an answer from your salesperson or sales rep, and they only have so much information, and they have to take some time to get all those answers for you, because it might not just be one call. It might be 10 calls to get you that one answer, right?
And like I said the last time, you'd be amazed at how far a box of donuts will go.
Do you have part ownership in this donut shop?
No, but it's the one thing that I always tell people is, especially being that I'm outside of it now, is in any sort of position where you're at customer service, there was such a long time that I work with Porsche where my answer always was no, because I couldn't do this, I couldn't do that. And when you're able to tell somebody yes, it means so much to a sales advisor or a sales manager. But having the patience to work with somebody and making sure that you know that they are you are appreciative of them, it goes so far in this. It does. It's like, I can't preach that enough. If you've got a good Porsche salesperson that you like, or somebody that takes good care of you, reach out and tell me you're appreciative.
Yeah, take good care of them.
Be amazed at how far that goes.
And I think it's still very cool. You know, we all love the Porsche brand because, you know, they're making cars that we still, you know, dream to have, and they're still true to their roots, and they're still racing and this, that, and the other. And the fact that they have this program available, honestly, I don't know how many other manufacturers have. I don't even know if like Volvo still does it, or
I think Volvo does, but the majority of the other German brands have I mean, I don't think Audi does it anymore. Yeah, a lot of them have cut back.
And this is very special.
It's huge.
Yeah. So with that, I've got a couple administrative things I want to remind everyone that we have Porsche Parade in Birmingham, June 9th through 15. Registration round 1 has already opened, so we'd love to see you in Birmingham. It's our crown jewel event. Tech Tactic East will be happening February 24th and 25th. We are sold out for February 24th, but we do have a few slots available for the 25th, so register soon. I'll be there. I think Mandy's going to be there, so we'll see you there. After that, we'll be heading to Amelia Works Reunion, Amelia Island, March 1st. Registration for the judged area is closed. We've sold out that. We do have a couple of corral spots that I believe registration for that is closing soon. Treffin at Sea, Alaska, the bucket list trip that we've talked about recently, that's going to happen July 28th through August 4th. We already have over 800 PCA members that are heading out to Alaska. And to be honest with you, we haven't really told the entire world about it because we have all these other great events happening before July. But if you're thinking about doing it, I would say book soon, because the rooms are selling out very quickly. I want to mention, if you haven't checked out PCASimRacing.com, check it out. We have live streaming on YouTube of the races. They have a 24-hour enduro race. I mean, this is a great way to get your fix, especially if your car is put away for the winter. And we recently celebrated, since Robert threw it up there, I'll talk about the newsletters. Be sure to sign up for eBrake News, Mark Fresh News, and Performance News at PCA.org. Just head over there and sign up. I was about to say that we celebrated our 100th PCA Insider podcast. It's been a treat to do, and my hat's off to Manny and Robert and Damon and all the other folks that have been involved to put this together. 100 episodes already. Check that out either on your favorite podcast provider or check it out on YouTube. And finally, if you're not a PCA member and own a Porsche, what are you waiting for? Head over to PCA.org, become a member of PCA, and join in all the fun. We have over 3,500 events in the US and Canada, doing stuff like this, just hanging out and having fun with our cars. Again, like, comment, and subscribe. And with that, I want to thank you, Casey, for joining us and giving us all the insight on these delivery programs. I know there's so much more in your noggin that I'm going to continue to pick over the next couple of years and share with our members. And I hope you enjoyed the program. Thank you, everyone, for joining us.